Hello and welcome back to Not Your Forte, a music education podcast for music ed students to help you survive and thrive throughout your undergrad. I'm Eric Tinkler, a fifth-year music education student at Kansas State University. This week, I'm not joined by Dr. Payne, but I'm joined by the wonderful Dr. Matthew Arau. I'm glad to have you back here. He's a fantastic person. You guys have listened to him before. Thank you, Dr. Arau, for filling in this week.
Eric, it's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you.
As we kind of continue on our leadership development series, we're now on to habit 6, and it's all about synergy. Before we get started and introduce our guest, just a reminder to go ahead, subscribe, like, do all those kind of good things to help us continue to grow. This has been a fantastic experience going through the series. We have many great educators, and I recommend that you go back and listen to those. And just a final note, if you haven't bought the book, The 7 Habits yet, please buy it. And I promise you, it'll be a lot of great things to continue on with your music education career. Without kind of any further ado, let's go ahead and get in and introduce our guest. Scott, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. It's great to be here. My name is Scott Sheehan, and I really am honored that you've included me in this discussion. I think there's so much that we can learn from the 7 Habits. It's been around for 30 some years and still learning from it every day. So I am starting my 24th year of teaching in central Pennsylvania. And I started my career at a very rural school. It was called Bald Eagle Area High School. And from there, I was there for 8 years, and then I moved to Hollidaysburg High School, which is a fun little fact about Hollidaysburg. It's the home of the Slinky. Anyhow, it is more of a sort of suburban setting, and I've been here for starting my 16th year. And at Hollidaysburg, I am the high school band director. I do a wind ensemble, concert band, jazz band, marching band. I teach AP Music Theory, a class called Rock, Rap, and Revolution, and 2 levels of guitar. And as I said, I'm also the department chair, so I oversee curriculum work and budgets and all those sorts of things. And in addition to those things at school, I've also been very involved with PMEA, the Pennsylvania Music Educators Association, and I am currently the president-elect for NAfME. It's been certainly an incredible journey and so many wonderful, wonderful opportunities. I really feel blessed about those things.
That's really fantastic. Can you talk a little bit about the kind of shift in what you saw from going from a rural school to a more kind of suburban area?
Sure, yeah. So when I began at Bald Eagle Area, day one, there were supposed to be 33 kids on the roster in the band program. And I showed up for first rehearsal. I'm all excited, and 13 kids showed up, and we had a parade the next day. So it was quite an interesting time. So from those 13, which ended up pulling in a few more, that first fall, we ended up having 76 in the band with doing a lot of recruiting. And when I left there 8 years later, we had 188. And you talk about synergy, which I know we're going to get into, but it was really trying to create that enthusiasm that the kids could see something that they never thought that they knew. They didn't know what band was going to be. And so it was really exciting to begin my career that way, because I didn't know a whole lot either. And so we just were growing and making it happen together. And so in that rural setting, there were less opportunities for the students than, say, in the suburban setting. And so, band became the thing to do. We just made it really exciting and fun. And of course, had a lot of musical goals and all those things too. And so that was exciting times for me, but also the community supported it because it was like the new thing. It was like everybody was involved because this was the new thing to do. When I came to Hollidaysburg, it was a much more established program. As I mentioned, a wind ensemble, a jazz band in the curriculum during the school day, sort of what you would expect, perhaps, some folks would expect from sort of that suburban, well-supported school district. Although, we are in central Pennsylvania. It's not like I'm in Pittsburgh or Philadelphia suburbs. It's more probably what most people would consider a small town, but there's some means here to be able to support music education, which is pretty exciting. So I think in terms of students, I think the students are pretty much the same. Kids are kids in a lot of places, and if we can turn them on to music and have them be excited about music and excited to be together and learn and connect and grow, I think that part of it is the same. The support was different, because in the rural setting, as I said, there were just less opportunities, and so the students kind of didn't know what they didn't know. And when I was out starting my career, I was in the same boat. We're all, like I said, sort of figuring it out together. And I was fortunate to be very close to Penn State University, and I was able to connect with some professors and some folks there that really helped to guide my thinking in what we did with the program there. And so that was very fortunate experience. And then in Hollidaysburg, as I said, there was a lot of structure already in place, really well-defined booster organization that supported the program, and it's music boosters. It's K-12 music boosters. And so we think a lot as a music department, as a team here, so that really kind of makes a little bit of a difference too, I think.
So before we kind of dive into the main topic and everything, can you talk a little bit about your involvement with NAfME, what exactly you do, how you got involved, and maybe just talk about how we as collegiate students can get involved with our local NAfME chapters?
Absolutely. And I'll tell you this, don't ever wait to be great. That's my first piece of advice. Don't wait to be great. I was a very young teacher. I was in my third year of teaching, and I get this phone call from a colleague at another school district, and he said, "Hey, we need somebody to run for the District 4 president for PMEA." And I think I was 26 years old. And I said, "Really?" I knew who this gentleman was. He was, very respected in the area and all this. And I said, "Really?" And he said, "Yeah, we really think you do a great job." He had never seen me teach. He had never, there was nothing that he had ever really could base that question on. But so I talked to my wife, and she said, "Hey, go for it. It'll be fun." And, literally I've been serving in some capacity for Music Education Association since I was 26 years old. So well over 20 years doing that work. And so that's how it started. It was just a kind of a cold call, phone call. And I guess I did okay, because people, have asked me to do the next level. And so I went to PMEA, and I was the state president for PMEA, and it's still very involved in a lot of committees and work there. And then folks said, "Hey, we think we'd love to nominate you for the Eastern Division president for NAFME." And I said, "Wow, okay." And I talked to my wife. This is a great little quick story. I talked to my wife, and this really hit me at home so much. I said, the PMEA commitment was big. All these things are 6 years. It's 2 years as elect, 2 years as president, 2 years as past president. You're serving on boards and meetings. And so I said, if you don't want me to do this, because we have a daughter, and I said, if you don't want me to do this, I'm with it. I regret no. I will not be upset. It's fine. And she said, "You have so much to offer. You need to do this." And it just it just, oh my goodness. I don't even have the words to know, how proud she was of me and the support that I've had to be able to do the Eastern Division. In fact, she got me a license plate for Christmas that says SS Music. So it's like this neat little remembrance. She said, "Win or lose, just think what an honor it was to be able to be in the election for Eastern Division president." And so, as I said, I ended up being elected. And then just this past year on Valentine's Day, I actually got the news that I was elected as the national president-elect. And, I'm incredibly humbled, excited to serve, but, incredibly humbled to have had these experiences from fairly humble beginnings here in Central PA with those 13 kids. But it's always been about the kids. It's always about the kids, always about the people, and trying to support one another and help each other. And so that's the quick version of a lot of meetings and a lot of committee work.
That's exciting. So let's go ahead and try to shift right into the topic. So we're talking about synergy this week. And as Covey kind of puts it, habit 6 is kind of a culmination of every other habit that we've already discussed, everything that we've talked about before. This is really putting it into action and applying it to those you're around, the organizations you run, your personal life, and just all that good stuff. But kind of first, we've been using this word synergy. Can you kind of provide maybe a definition on what synergy means to you?
Sure. Well, I think, if you read the Covey book, I think that it's, certainly the sum of the whole is greater than individual parts. We think of it that way. A lot of people might think of synergy as collaboration or communicating with other people, but, I really see synergy as going way deeper. I think it goes beyond all of those things. I think it's a deeper form of working together with the belief that through the process of these collaborations and through the process of connecting, and the collective outcome is going to be something much greater, a lot more rich and more even beautiful than what we came into the beginning of the conversation with. So I think it's not just collaborating with other people, but it's a belief that through the process of working with other people, we're going to achieve something greater that none of us came into with that idea initially, and so I think that that's really the power of synergy, is that we don't know what the destination is. We don't know what the outcome is right away when we walk into that conversation. It's something greater. We've all been in those meetings where we go in and we're going to have a discussion and a conversation, but in reality, somebody came with the agenda, put it in front of us, and this is what we're going to talk about, and these are the outcomes. Real synergy is not that way. It's coming at this with the idea and an expectation that we're going to grow together, and together we're going to create something much more powerful than one idea.
That's a really great way to put it. And one way I kind of like to explain synergy to someone who's like, oh, that's like a business concept, or like, I don't really understand it. I just talk about the instrument that they play. There's so many small parts that all come together, from everything from the mouthpiece to the mechanisms on the valves to all the work that goes in, all the different parts, that truly exceeds the sum of its part. Is when you're playing that instrument, it produces so much and it impacts so many people when you're able to play that instrument. And that's really just a synergetic kind of object, is your instrument that you play. So let's kind of keep building on this concept of synergy, and let's apply it to communication. What's that kind of look like? How do we as music educators become more synergetic in our communication?
Well, the book references something that I've been thinking about for years, and maybe it was that seed that was planted 20 years ago when I first read the book, but it's trust. I think to be able to walk into a room with your colleagues, or even folks that are brand new to you, even strangers that you don't know, but you walk into that conference room, you walk into that project, and you have to bring with you a sense that I can trust these people, that I can trust them with my ideas, and that I'm going to trust them to bring ideas. So along with trust, of course, is respect. So I think that those are, incredibly important pillars in this. I also think it's about courage. I think, synergetic communications have the courage to be vulnerable, to open yourself up to those conversations, and to open your ideas up and realize that your idea might not be the one that ends up being chosen, or maybe it's changed and altered, and there's a hybrid that comes out of it that's even better than what you walked in with. I can remember working on a curriculum project here in Pennsylvania for music educators across the state. And, it was about 8 of us on this committee. We walk in, and I had a pretty good idea of what this lesson planning piece of the curriculum framework was going to look like. And we left with something completely different, and it was completely awesome. And everybody just collaborated. It was one of the most synergetic moments dealing with something that could be pretty dull, with curriculum work. And we came out with that. And that was 9 years ago or 8 years ago. And I'm still excited about that project, because it still is in effect in Pennsylvania. Music teachers are using it. In fact, later this afternoon, I'm using it in a presentation that I'm doing for another group. So, those ideas spark, as you can hear, those ideas spark an enthusiasm and an energy about it. So you have those communications, and you leave better. You leave better than where you started when you're really in that synergetic type atmosphere.
I really enjoyed what you touched on, talking about confidence and that role in synergy. throughout all the habits, Covey talks about this concept of your personal security and needing to grow and become more comfortable. And that comes with like habits 1 through 3 of identifying those kind of private victories about why you're doing what you're doing, putting first things first, and just kind of shifting that, continue to shift to a win-win mentality and continue to grow, be proactive, all that good stuff. Dr. Arau or Mr. Sheehan, can you talk a little bit kind of about how you develop that confidence more?
All right. Well, Scott, it's a real privilege to be on this program with you. And I believe that, confidence, like trust, is actually something that you build and you grow and develop over time. And I was really interested in what Mr. Sheehan said about trust being necessary for synergy to happen. And trust actually begins with trusting ourselves, truly. And maybe trusting ourselves is one of the most challenging things. It's easy to focus on others, but where trust really begins is, do we believe in ourselves? Which is what confidence is about as well, right? So do you do what you say you're going to do? Do you follow through? Are you somebody that you would actually trust? And if not, that's a starting point. That's a starting point, because you can become who you want to become. You don't have to stay who you are today. You can become who you want to be tomorrow, right? And it just begins with a first step. And maybe being the person that reaches out, being proactive, reaches out and asks a friend how they're doing instead of waiting for them to ask you how you're doing. Maybe you go and do something special for somebody else without expecting anything in return, right? Maybe you listen more deeply to people when they speak to you instead of just wanting to respond, right? And all of these concepts come from the 7 habits, but along the way, as you start developing these new habits and practicing them, notice the word practice. I think this is why musicians get this. You don't develop confidence, you don't develop trust overnight. You don't master the trumpet in a day, right? You practice, you develop habits, and that's why these are so important. And building trust in yourself is the first step. And then the trick with trust is, in order to create trust, somebody has to take the first step. Someone has to extend a hand of trust in order for the other person to come to you, to meet you halfway. And so that's an act of courage to believe in someone else and to trust them. So I think trust and confidence, they go together. And as you have stepping stones of success, and they can be small achievements. And that's the great thing. You don't need to have this massive achievement, win the gold medal or something in order to build confidence. It's every day noticing something you got a little bit better at, or stepping back and reflecting on something that you're grateful during that day and say, you know what? Today was a good day. I got this one thing done. And just a series of stepping stones leads to building confidence, trust in yourself, and then it's much more easy for you to extend the hand of trust. And I would just love to hear more from Scott about your thoughts on trust also, and creating an environment that sounds so exciting where there is trust in the air. And in a time like today where it seems like we have a trust crisis right now, it seems, in our society, how can we move forward to develop trust amongst people?
Yeah. Trust, it couldn't be more important in today's world right now with everything that's going on. For those listeners that listen to this in a few years, they might go back and go, oh, I remember that. But, for those that are now, we're in the middle of a lot of pandemics. It's not just a virus that's got us, kind of twisted upside down in our country right now. And so I think one of the things with trust is follow through. In a good golf swing, it's the follow through that finishes it out and really gets that drive to move. I think that it's the follow through. You say what you're going to do and you follow through and you do it. And that's what builds trust for others. But I also agree so much with what Matthew was saying about it. It really does start with a trust and a belief inside of you, that you believe that when you're talking about synergy, you believe that everybody that's coming to this conversation has something to contribute that's really important. And you're not going to know what that is until you have that trust in place to share your ideas, hear their ideas, and together you're going to build something that you just didn't really know existed prior to that time. And so, I think that it comes in, with your own personal beliefs, your own value systems of what you come to the table with. And that could be something musically, that could be in an ensemble. You think of so much of what we do in music is synergistic in so many ways. I mean, you used the instrument idea, which was great. But how about just music itself, note to note, right? Creates a melody, creates a harmony. But more than any note to note and so on, how about how, think about the meaning and the beauty that's created through music in that way. And so I know I'm getting off the topic here for a minute of building that trust, but it's a really, I think the big topic you started with was communication. And, what does synergistic communication look like? And it's just like musicians working to communicate together as to create a piece of music, or the composer, look at the composer's aspect of creating something. These notes are going to work together to create something that any one note by itself would really be meaningless. And you put all this together and you've got something incredibly powerful, moving, life-changing. And I think when people come to that, when we bring ourselves to that, that really is just powerful as how music moves. So I'll stop there. I'm sure Dr. Arau and I could go on and on about this.
I thought it was absolutely wonderful, kind of diving into the concept of synergy within an ensemble, within music. And I think that synergy really comes as a result of a culture. Of being able to build a culture. Dr. Arau kind of touched on the kind of world crisis we're going through, of a pandemic, of everything we're going through. I just finished reading The Culture Code, Daniel Coyle. That was the next book on the list. And just, I think a big quote I kind of got out of that is, successful cultures use crisis to crystallize their purpose. I know we're kind of getting a little off script, but I'm enjoying this conversation. Talk a little bit about how you're building that culture within your ensemble, or building that culture within NAFME, of establishing that purpose, so that even though we're going through kind of these really strange, unprecedented times right now, that you're still able to keep that synergy and keep that momentum rolling and keep those connections that are so important to the culture growing.
Well, I'll start by saying it's got to be win-win. You've got to come at this win-win. And I just quoted Covey 2 nights ago on a meeting, for a NAFME meeting, and I said, we've got to seek to understand before we want to be understood. And that is power. There is power in that statement. That has lived with me for a very long time. And often when I go into a meeting or into a new group, or even a music ensemble or something, you listen first. You use that trained ear, and you listen, and you try to learn what's the culture, what's the room, what's the temperature of the room, what's happening, what are the issues. I think that's so important, to listen first and not to always be so quick. I think there's a couple lines in Hamilton that speak to that too. I can't emphasize the importance of that for an organization to be successful, because no one wants to be talked at, no one wants to be talked down to. If you're truly in a sense of servant leadership, I think it's really about others. It's really about everybody else. And so we need to know where folks are coming from. And I know NAFME, our current president, Dr. Mackie Spradley, is very much into being responsive to the needs of our members. And NAFME is an association of associations. We call it a family of associations. And so we're working together, and it's diverse. And I think we're going to talk about that in a little bit, but the states are all very diverse, and the needs of MEA, say in Nebraska, is going to be very different than New York. And so we've got to understand, we've got to come at it with that Covey understanding of what's going on. And when we're trying to create a program or an initiative, we've got to think win-win. We've got to look at this as not who's going to give up something in order for everybody else to gain, or we want to try the majority rule or that sort of thing. We really have to think of what's in it for everyone and for the best of everyone. So I talk a little bit there, but in terms of my band, I think that it's about the culture of family. And we talk about that all the time. Band is family, and we're there for each other. And that comes back to trust. I know it seems to be the theme right now, and maybe because it's lacking in so many places, that when you find it, you latch on to it, and it becomes very important. And so in my band, if you ask the kids, if you called them today and said, hey, talk to me about your band, I think that probably the majority would say, oh, our band is a family. We look out for each other. We're there for each other. We support each other. It's the band room's the place to be, after school or in the morning while you're waiting for the homeroom to start, all of those things, that it's a safe place. And I think along with, those basic needs, you think about Maslow and the hierarchy, and it's those basic needs, safety, they've got to feel a sense of safety and a sense of belonging there. And so I think that when you think about those just sort of synergistic practices and what that looks like in an ensemble or in a program, in a school, or even in an organization like NAfME or an MEA, it's really about trying to listen and know what people need, and then do your very best to help provide that. And it might not be you that can give the answers, and that's okay. Know where your strengths are, and know where the other folks' strengths are, and reach out.
I think too often. Or go ahead, Dr. Arau.
I was just going to touch on something important that Scott's talking about, and one of the key words, in addition to trust and culture, is that Scott keeps coming back to, is listening. And it reminds me of what Covey wrote about the 5 levels of listening. It's always stuck with me and causes me to pause and think, okay, what level am I on? So I'm just going to share this with the listeners. The lowest level that Covey labels, so we'll call it level 1, is ignoring. Level 2.
Wait. What did you say? I wasn't paying attention.
Touche. All right. I get that all the time. All right. So level 1 is ignoring. 2 is pretending to listen. Right. Okay. Number 3 is selective listening. 4 is attentive listening, kind of think of like edge of your seat, like really engaged. But the highest level of listening that Covey identifies, and I think this is maybe this step where we could move in groups and as a society, is what he calls empathic listening. And this is the seek first to understand, then to be understood, but to really try your best to understand like where the person's coming from, try to understand their feelings also. That's more than just like the facts, but also like, how do they feel about this? And that's where empathy and compassion fall into this. And if we can get to a place where we can say, okay, I don't quite agree with the decision they're making, but what is it like to be in their shoes? What pressures are they under that maybe I don't quite understand? I know right now in our country and in education, teachers and administrators seem to be at odds right now, because administrators are making some big decisions. Some teachers feel like they've been left out of the decision making. And so there's sort of this trust issue. I have a friend who had a distrust issue with his principal who had made a decision. They felt like they weren't involved in the decision at all, but they got together and had this conversation, and it ended in virtual hugs and a much greater understanding, where the band director now understood the pressures on the principal and where they were coming from, and having to make these really hard decisions on how we bring people back to school. So I just wanted to bring that up, because I think if we can listen more deeply and seek to understand, rather than just always wanting to this knee-jerk response. If we don't like the outcome, we just, bam, we attack. And I think if we can like pause and think like, hey, I don't quite understand it yet, to quote Carol Dweck's growth mindset idea. I don't quite understand where you're coming from, but I'm not going to attack you. I'm going to listen. Be like, well, help me understand. I think really that's the pathway forward. And until we do that, we can't achieve synergy. And I want to get to that place that Scott Sheehan talked about, where you have meetings that are just filled with enthusiasm, like, oh, what about this idea? What about this idea? And then all of a sudden you leave that meeting like, whoa, we had this incredible idea that we didn't realize was possible, but because we were open and trusting and listened deeply, we're much further along. And that's where I hope we can move.
Now, I'm going to sidebar a little bit based on something what you said about kind of a disconnect between teachers and administrators. And this is something I'm going to advocate to students right now who are in college is be reaching out to those people making decisions, to the faculty, to the director of the school. Be reaching out to those people who are making those decisions and make sure that your voice is heard when it comes to reopening this fall, what it's going to look like to ensure and really be proactive about not just your education, but your health as well. I know in the last week and a half or so, I've been working on organizing some student leaders that I know of, and we're forming a committee to talk with the faculty committee about kind of reopening and what K-State is going to plan on do, because it's your education, and that's a big concept to understand. It's like you are attending this college for your education, paying for your education, and be proactive about it. You don't have to just sit back and just do whatever happens and go with that. You're the student, and you are learning, and you have the opportunity to make a connection, to build up the synergy, build up the trust level within the music program, with whatever program you might be in, and build up that trust, build up that communication, and then you'll truly achieve that level of synergy within your music program, ensembles, whatever it might be. And before we kind of keep moving on to what we actually wrote about, if you'll notice throughout this entire conversation, we're specifically covering habit 6 today, but you will see all of us continually reference back to each and every habit within just kind of how we're describing it. And that's the beauty of this. It's synergy, and synergy within all these habits, even the way in which Covey wrote this and built this up. It's a really just amazing way in which he was able to construct this and order it in a way. But sidebar over. Let's talk about, excuse me, my voice cracked a little bit.
Hold on 1 second. I don't want to interrupt you, but I wanted to throw something in there real quick. Sorry to
go ahead.
on
No,
here.
go ahead.
You can edit how you need to edit to make it work. But you made an incredible point about the beauty of how this book is written and the journey that it takes you on. And it is synergy in and of itself. I think that's something to really point out for those folks that are listening and reading and taking the time to dig into this book. There's depth. There is a lot of depth on these concepts, and even in the construction of the book itself, there's depth to it. And so I want to make sure that folks get that there's a lot more to it than, it's a lot of personal journey for us as leaders, with these different concepts, but it's also the depth of how this book is constructed. So I just wanted to point that out to everybody.
Really great point. And now as I speak in my actual deep manly voice and not the boyish squeak, we touched on this a little bit already, but let's talk about the importance of valuing differences, especially in today's world, especially in a music classroom, and just overall in your community and the people you're around.
Sure, I'll start this, and I definitely want to hear Dr. Arau's ideas on this as well. But when I think of this valuing differences, the first thing that comes to my mind is culturally responsive teaching. And there is so much that every child comes into the classroom with, and they have a culture in and of themselves. And within that room, that creates a culture in and of itself. And there are so many layers to the cultures that are present in our classrooms and in our schools, and of course in our communities. And I think we as teachers need to be responsive to those needs. And it's not just about checking boxes. I mean, that's not what it is about. It's not about tokenism. Oh, I did that one piece by a person of color for my repertoire with the ensemble, and you check the box. It's not about that. Or, oh, guess what? Our school's having a Black History Month concert. That's not culturally responsive teaching. It's definitely not about checking boxes. It's about really, truly understanding your students and understanding all of the areas of which they come from. And we see diversity in so many different ways. There's obviously the visual diversity you can see. Students come in with different backgrounds and different races and nationalities, and maybe that's visible to us. But there is so much more under under, the cover that you have to take a look at and to really understand. Socioeconomic diversity, huge. Abilities, whether that be a musical abilities and playing how folks play or sing or however that is, there's musical abilities, but there's cognitive abilities, academic abilities, and you don't see those things outwardly. But a great teacher can really find ways to learn about those things from their students, and then build a curriculum and build experiences, musical experiences that are relevant to them and responsive to their needs. So just because I learned how to play Holst in college and had this amazing musical experience for me with the Holst, and that's part of the canon and that's what we should do, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's right for every child. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't still expose students to the Holst. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing by any means. I think there's a lot of value in the masterworks that we have in the band world or the choral world, and certainly the orchestral repertoire. But there's also much more that's out there right now. The diversity amongst composers, the diversity amongst styles. It's kind of no holds barred of the availability now out there with the internet and so on. And so I kind of wrap this all back around of the beauty and the synergy that is created when we really take the time to understand the cultures of our students and build something for them, because this is about them. This is about their education. Just as you pointed out, as a college student, this is my education and I need to make sure my voice is heard. But we need to make sure our students have voice and choice in what they're doing. And that doesn't mean that you negate all the training that you've done and all the work that you've done, but that means that you take pause and think about what's really best for them, and then grow and build from there.
Really well put. Dr. Arau, do you have thoughts on that?
Well, I really appreciate what Scott's saying about culturally responsive teaching. And, it also makes me think of how we need to be really aware of the emotions of our students, particularly as we're going back to school, and trauma-informed instruction. And I've talked about this with Scott Edgar on some other webinars about social emotional learning and the importance of mindfulness in our classrooms. And truly, I do believe that everyone in the classroom has experienced trauma, and it includes the teachers and every single student. I don't think there's a student going back to school that hasn't experienced some form of trauma. And sure, there's levels of trauma, but when you experience your own trauma, it's true to you. It's real to you, right? You might say, well, that your trauma is not as much trauma as the other person. That I really think we just need to be really aware of that and sensitive. And that's where like the listening and compassion is going to be so important in our classrooms, and providing spaces for mindfulness and being really aware of the social emotional aspects, which of course we have to understand our students and know what they need in order to meet them. The other thing we need to do is listen deeply to our students and get excited about what they bring to the classroom. Maybe the traditional model was we bring the curriculum and boom, there it is. But now imagine an exciting classroom that is synergy in and of itself, where the students have voice, like Mr. Sheehan shared, and they share what they're into. And then all of a sudden the teacher changes role. Now all of a sudden the teacher's the learner. I'll tell you what, we're working with what we call digital natives, right? Students that have grown up with technology. We can learn so much from them now that we have to use technology or get to use technology much more in these hybrid fashions. Now, all of a sudden, the student's teaching the teacher. Or what about styles of music that we're not familiar with? I remember when I was a high school teacher, students were bringing me recordings. They're like, hey, Arau, do you know dubstep? And I was like, what? What? And then they would, and then all of a sudden they were explaining the complexities of this music to me. And I was like, wow. Super cool. That's a little over my head right now, but awesome. And so when we create an environment that isn't just leader to student, right? Leader to follower, where it's this stew, this melting pot of ideas, and all of a sudden students start to recognize, and you start to see in your students strengths and abilities that maybe they didn't even see in themselves, but because you've created that environment for them to shine. Maybe somebody shines with drawing versus writing. So when you put them in a group project, maybe they become the artist, right? That represents the group. And you know, people can have their strengths shine in a synergistic classroom that I think begins with compassion.
I think there's a true beauty in the differences in which everyone has. Everyone brings something different to the table. We've talked a lot about kind of culturally responsive teaching, and that's definitely something here on the podcast we need to dive more into one day. But that doesn't start when you're a teacher, when you first get that job. Once you're in front of students, you can start learning to become more culturally responsive the instant you step on campus. I know, being from Kansas, I'm from a small town in Kansas, and the demographic was not very diverse. And so I didn't grow up around a lot of diversity, a lot of difference. Everyone looked like me, and pretty much everyone acted pretty much similarly. And that's the environment I grew up in. And I can't control the environment in which I grew up in. But once I got to college, I was working to take initiative to become better understanding of my friends who might look different than me, who might believe in things differently than I do, and having conversations with them. I've been watching this YouTube series. It's called Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man. It's Emmanuel Acho. He's a former NFL player, I think, who does this, and it's just some really phenomenal stuff. And because when I think about it, and he points this out, is I currently, and we're getting a little off topic here, but I don't struggle with anything because of, say, like the color of my skin or anything like that, and other people do. And it's understanding those differences in which our students might deal with, in which our peers might deal with, when it comes to starting to gain that understanding. It's having some of those uncomfortable conversations and using the resources you have available. Oh my goodness. We talked about the kind of revolution of internet, of having all these electronics and stuff. We have so much information at just like within the smart device that we have, or the fact that we're on a college campus. There's some of the best educators, best learners right on your college campus. Reach out to friends, reach out to professors, and have some of these conversations. Be proactive, like we talked about all the way in Habit 1, of learning how to be culturally responsive. Reading books, I'm watching documentaries and everything like that, because everyone brings something different to the table, and that's the beauty, especially when it comes to music. When a music classroom, when you're able to, say you're the conductor, you're standing in front of your students, of having them share their thoughts on what they feel from the music, about what maybe they feel like the music should do, where it should go, what it means to them. And it can truly impact the entirety of the experience within the culture of like, oh, this means that I never thought about it that way. And then proceeding to grow and keep going. I'm talking a lot here, but like I said, I just challenge you guys at home, you guys listening, whenever this might be, to be culturally responsive, to learn how to be culturally responsive, have those uncomfortable conversations, and just value those differences. So getting back on the topic, off the soapbox now, talk about, there's a couple statements that Covey kind of outlines when people are thinking about this concept of synergy, or about personal development, or just really any of these habits. They'll say something like, oh, it's just the way they are, or it's too difficult for them to change, or for me to change that. Can you talk about kind of how these really aren't great excuses?
Sure. I think that they're limiting, and that's the thing. They really are excuses. And we have to look inside ourselves first. It really starts with our own self journey, recognizing the biases, the implicit biases that we come into our world with. And as you talked about growing up in Kansas, I grew up in central Pennsylvania, and of course the cultures are different between Kansas and central Pennsylvania. But there was a lot that as a kid growing up, I didn't know that I didn't know about the people that lived in my street even, let alone in my town. And although people could say, oh, well, that, is a certain demographic, but within that demographic, there's a lot of diversity, whether that, as I said earlier, be socioeconomic, it could be abilities, it could be gender preferences, gender identity, it could be sexual orientation, all of those things. There's that we have differences all about us, and that's the beauty. And so when people say, oh, well, this is just the way they are, or it's too hard to change, and those sorts of things, I think that it's somebody limiting their view, limiting their perception, instead of widening the view, casting a wider net, trying to, see and learn more about others, which is only going to work just to help everyone, not just you. And of course you gain benefit too from learning more about the people that are on your street or in your classroom or that you're making music with. But everyone learns more and everyone grows. And so I think we shouldn't limit by our own experiences or what we see. And that first, don't judge a book by its cover, because inside that book, there's so much more. There's so much depth. There's so much knowledge. There's so much excitement. And I think that for some people, it's that instinct of self-preservation. They want to not feel bad about themselves. And so therefore, I'm either only going to have this one view about something in particular, or I'm only going to have this one take on people of a certain type and however. And so I think that it really has to start the self journey and be more open and, really try to get to, as Dr. Arau pointed out earlier, that empathetic level, that to be able to have that empathy for others and take a moment to walk in their shoes. We've both mentioned this idea of just taking on a pause. The world moves at such a fast rate all the time. And I think it's really important for all of us to just take that pause and really think about the power of words, the power of our body language, the power of how we communicate and what that shows. And so for me, I think trying to limit the excuses and see the possibilities that are out there from that idea of working together. So that's where I would go with that.
Really well put. And kind of as we're shifting to the end of this podcast here, just recapping a little bit about everything. It's all about trust. It's all about listening. And it's all about just creating a safe, vulnerable environment. And that's really how we get to that level of synergy in which Covey talks about. And that's how we continue to grow as people, as educators, as whatever that might be. And it's a truly beautiful thing when we're able to achieve higher and higher and influence positive change in our environment, an environment that's oftentimes too negative. So final kind of wrap-up question. This is something we've asked everyone who's been on for this series, because we're talking about leadership development. And it's one of my favorite things to ask, because everyone has a different thought. Everyone gives a different reason. And this once again goes to valuing those differences that people have in their perceptions. But could you talk a little bit about how you would define what a leader is, or what leadership looks like, and just kind of talk why you think that?
Sure. Well, when I work with my students, especially in the marching band, because there's so many moving parts to that, I have this definition that is a Dr. Tim Lotzenheiser definition that I learned when I was a kid at one of his early workshops. And he's been a mentor to so many of us, but this has stuck with me forever. A leader does what needs to be done when it needs to be done, whether you want to do it or not. And what that boils down to, that little statement boils down to service. It's really about serving others. And the secret here for leadership is that the more you give, the more you gain. And these are, if you've taken a Dr. Tim workshop, you've heard these things before, but they couldn't be more true. And for me, that's really how I have lived. It's how I've been able to have a lot of the opportunities that I've had over the years, because I'm really honestly the guy that says, hey, what do you need? Can I help you out? and I want to understand where they're coming from. I'm genuine with my help. I hidden motive for wanting to run for the national presidency of NAFME. I don't have an agenda. I don't have something that I'm hoping to put on my resume, and certainly I'm not going to make more money for having done that. It's a volunteer position, but it's about serving. It's about service. And when I see the work that needs to be done in the areas of culturally responsive teaching, in the areas of diversity and access for music education, I know there's so much work to be done. And if I can serve and help in that capacity and bring people together and create that really, truly kind of symbiotic, synergistic experience, that's what it's all about for me. I really am motivated by working with other people and helping other people. And because of that, I have gained so much personally. And as I said, I truly feel blessed. Even Matthew and I, and how we connected, and it's been this crazy little thing over the last 2 years, I think it's been, or maybe not even quite 2 years yet.
Yeah.
We have had so many experiences that have brought us together. When you said that that's who was going to be the podcast, they're like, oh my God, you're talking about synergy. I mean, this is it. Because there's all kind of crazy little life things, God things, whatever you want to say, or where your beliefs are. I really believe things happen for reasons, and people come into our lives for reasons, and it's to help each other and to help each other grow. And in music, it's certainly to help pass on the power of music to change lives. So that's how I would define leadership.
Mr. Sheehan, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to join on this fun adventure of a podcast that I do. It's really phenomenal to have the opportunity to talk to great educators such as yourself who believe it so passionately into the power of music, the power of service leadership. Do you have anything upcoming, or does NAFME have anything upcoming that you'd like to share, or also maybe like an email or contact information if people have questions?
Sure. Well, as far as what's upcoming, who knows? It's like, there's so much that's up in the air right at the moment. I know that I would say the biggest thing that I would watch for, or encourage the listeners to watch for, are the online professional development opportunities. There's a lot of great webinars, not just by NAFME, all sorts of wonderful associations are putting out some tremendous work. I've been incredibly impressed that over the last 3 or 4 months, we have pushed our profession forward in about what would have taken probably 5 years. Music educators always rise to the challenges. We had a huge pivot, and sometimes I say, you like the word pivot, that's been a kind of a catchword. It's really about a punt. We were punted into a whole nother realm, and we've done a great job. We have supported one another and really tried to make the most to help each other, to help our students, and so on. And so just watch for all of the opportunities online that are coming out. In terms of face-to-face events and things, I think we're still going to be waiting for a little while till we see the return of when it can be safe to be together. But my contact information, I'm always happy to talk to folks, especially college students. Love to connect and hear your stories and know what's happening and in any way that I might be able to help or point you in a direction. So my contact information is Sheehan, SHEEHAN Music Ed. That's all one piece. Sheehan Music Ed at gmail.com. Always happy to hear from folks. Feel free to reach out anytime. And I'll just say that one more time. SHEEHAN MUSICED at gmail.com.
Well, just final thank you, Dr. Arau. Thank you to you as well. It's always great to have you on this podcast. Mr. Sheehan talked about connections, and we really only know each other for about a year, and it's just been a wonderful opportunity to connect with a great educator. For you listeners out there, if you haven't checked out his work with Upbeat Global, I highly recommend checking it out. There's a lot of great resources on there, webinars, and just motivational tools, and just really, really wonderful stuff. And kind of with that, let's go ahead and wrap up. I'll take everyone out. Usually Dr. Payne does this, so I'll try my best to make him proud. All right. Thank you, everyone, for listening to Not Your Forte. It was another fantastic week, and we ask that you, like always, subscribe, rate, share, keep helping us grow, because this is such a fun adventure. There's a lot of great content that we're sharing, and we want to make sure that we're reaching everyone in which we can, just across the country, across the world. Next week, and we're ending off our leadership development series with a bang. And season 3 finale, we're getting all hyped. We're having our Dr. Tim, and he's a man who needs no introduction. And we are beyond excited to kind of wrap up, talk about Habit 7, and just finish up this series on a strong note. As always, thank you for listening to Not Your Forte, and we'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye.